like that. So, do you teach any other classes that have Google Hangout setups like this?
Yeah, so 3050, this one, this is interface design. I mean, so this is information architecture. 3200 is interface design. So I do them the same. And I keep referring to Laura because Laura took, its interface design is in the fall. This one is in the spring. The sequence in which you're taking it makes a little bit more sense because it doesn't matter totally, but this process is really the precursor to the interface design.
Okay, so do you teach interface design over the summer?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
If you needed it, we could probably do like a one-on-one thing because I have everything set up. Okay, so the lights are still kind of bad, so I'm just going to turn off these lights too. Okay, so here we go. Enough of my travel stories. I don't know why I started telling you that anyway. So I am broadcasting now, which is kind of embarrassing, but this is all going on YouTube right now. What we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen right here, which creates this crazy thing. And then for you to see it, we got to click over to this. Okay. I know, it's kind of bizarre.
Like yours.
Right. So we're going to go to get to World Classroom, you go to worldclassroom.webster.edu. And Pamela, you're going to need this for a lot of your classes. So there's probably a link to it on the main Webster website, but just FYI, it's worldclassroom.webster.edu. And you're going to log in with your connections ID and password. So hopefully you have that by now. You don't have that set up yet?
No,
well,
after class, I'll go see.
Okay. Once you log in, you're going to see all of the classes. And online classes always have a component in Canvas. This is not technically an online class, although I do use Canvas really heavily and have everything there. So every class will have a shell. So you may be enrolled in a face-to-face class and you'll still see it in your list of courses, but your instructor may not use it that much. But if it's an online class, like you're taking strategic writing for interactive media, that's all online. It'll all be through Canvas. Okay, so in your courses, you should find this Intm 3050. And if you go to modules, I have everything set up into different modules. And this week, so I mentioned before, I have everything set up as like week 1, 2, week 3, 4, week 5, 6, et cetera, et cetera. So in week 1, 2, there are a few things. There is week 1, 2 reading and watching. Obviously, there are no points assigned to it because this is just what I want you to do. So you would do this first. Then there is a quiz associated with the reading and the watching. And anything that I give you to read or watch, the link is, the links are all right there. So there's a YouTube video embedded here and then some PDFs that I want you to read. So actually, you should be excited because this is actually some really good reading. You're going to learn about Edward Tufte and Richard Saul Wurman, who, and this is probably a quiz question, I'm just going to give it away now. Richard Saul Wurman is the guy who invented the term information architecture. He came up with that term, and he actually is the founder of the TED conferences. So you probably have heard of TED. So he's an interesting guy, and he talks about what he was trying to do with the term information architecture. It kind of arose from this idea of so much data and how do we architect this information into spaces that are understandable. So that's what your reading is all about, but it's a good amount of reading, so please get started on it early.
So what was this guy's name?
Richard Saul Wurman, S-A-U-L, Richard Saul, and then Wurman.
Like the religion woman?
Wurman, W-U-R-M-A-N, Wurman. So that's what, those are the assignments for week 1, 2. If we go back to the modules, there's some discussion participation. Actually, there's no, it just says each 2-week blocks I will post an open-ended discussion question related to the topic. To receive full credit for participation, you should make at least 2 points, post, respond to the question being posed, and comment on one of your classmates or my posts. So,
and where will those be?
They're all under your modules. So you can navigate, I have it broken down into these week 1, 2, these 2-week blocks. Right. But if you just want to see discussions, you can go to discussions. But here is the week 1, 2 discussion that I'm asking you to participate in. And the question is, How has your perception of information changed based on the reading, watching you have done this week? Why do you think we are starting this course talking about information? Do you ever feel overwhelmed by information, when and why? So obviously you're going to want to do all of the reading and everything before you answer this question. So again, I'll pop back to week 1, 2 modules. You're going to have, like I said, 3 main. Well, we'll skip project 1 for right now. Let's talk about the week 1, 2 visual scavenger hunt. And Laura's real familiar with these. Each 2-week block, so you'll have 8 total. I'm giving you this little assignment. Shouldn't take you all that long, but it relates to the topic that we are discussing. So each of the scavenger hunts work the same way. So basically, in all of the assignment descriptions, the first paragraph and the last paragraph are the same. I'm just asking you to find something different. What you do with it will be pretty much the same. So it says, find an example that demonstrates the phenomenon listed below. To make your case, submit a screenshot or an image of the example you find with a well-written 1-paragraph description addressing the question below. Please keep in mind that you should not be writing in the first person in your explanation. So I don't want anything like, I think that I found that I. Okay, because what you're doing, you're trying to make a professional assessment, right? So you're saying the website, blah, 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 exhibits the principles of this. It has nothing to do with how you feel, or like, so you don't want to write in the first person. Okay, so this is what you're looking for. In the Tufte reading, you were introduced to the concept of small multiples. Tufte contends that small multiples can aid in our understanding of information by allowing us to see trends and changes. Find an example of small multiples as a means to communicate information. How does the use of small multiples allow you to better understand the information? What design techniques are used in the presentation of the small multiples to support this effect? Dun, dun, dun. You don't have any idea what small multiples are yet. That means you have to do the reading, right? Your responses will be scored on a scale of 1 to 30 based on the quality of your writing, clarity of your explanation, and strength of your argument. So, you got it so far? Pretty simple assignment. Now, Tufte, let me tell you a little bit about Edward Tufte, because he's sort of the guru of information. Edward Tufte he's a Yale professor. He may be retired now. He's probably up there in age. So he's a Yale professor who is really interested in the presentation of information. And his theory is that the way that we present and communicate information can radically affect the way it is perceived, the way that people perceive it. He's written 3 or 4 books, and they're beautiful books. I have them in my office if you would like to see them. And I actually I made PDFs from each of the books, but they're these beautiful hardback books. He couldn't find a publisher for them because of all of the special detail, like they're like flaps that lift up, and they're all this little special detail to help illustrate his points in the book. So he self-published them remarkably well. So in his books, he talks about specific examples. He pulls real examples, and he talks about why they're problematic or why they were effective. And they're examples of maps and charts and things from hundreds of years ago to more like present day. One of his most compelling examples, just to give you, I think this sums up kind of what he's talking about, is the space shuttle launch of the Challenger explosion, which was in 1986. Probably you guys weren't alive then, but I was. And when that happened, when the Challenger exploded, do you know what I'm talking about? And Christine McCaufel, she was a teacher, and she went up in the Challenger, and everybody was really excited, and most people were watching it on TV live. And the shuttle took off, and it exploded in midair. It was just the most horrific thing, right? So what does Edward Tufte have to do with it? He says that the documentation, the presentation of the data, if it had been presented in a more effective way, they would have not launched that shuttle on that day. So here's the deal. The way that the shuttle is constructed is kind of like, when you stack cups upside down on top of each other, that's kind of the bottom part of the shuttle. And each piece, sometimes they expand and they get stuck together, after they come out of the dishwasher. Well, that's kind of how the shuttle is made, but there's a rubber gasket between each one, and they call it an O-ring. So that rubber gasket is what seals those pieces together. They knew that if those O-rings failed, then the shuttle could blow up. So in all of their test launches, that piece would come apart and they would examine the O-rings after the launch. And what they found out is that in lower temperatures, the O-rings tended to crack and fail more. So they were at risk, you know, the O-rings were definitely more at risk to fail if you were launching at a lower temperature. The lowest temperature that they had ever launched at was about 50 degrees because, you know, they launch always in Florida, whatever. The day of the launch, which was in January 1986, the temperature was 22 degrees. So he has this chart, and I bet I could Google it right now just to show you what it's.
I thought that it would be 22 in Florida. It's just.
There's no way they didn't think that was cold.
Yeah, they knew.
Maybe the paperwork would still take too long to process to cancel a launch or something.
So here
Someone made a decision.
here we go. These were all of these dots on the graph here indicate different launches and the amount of O-ring damage. So here we have, it's very difficult to read right here. Let me see if I can view image, maybe look, it's still very tiny. So this right here where we have the largest number of damaged O-rings per launch. So you have 0, 0, 0 at all of these higher temperatures. Well, as we get to the lower temperatures, we see more O-ring damage, right? And this down here, below 20 degrees, so this is 30, 35, 20 degrees. It was 31 degree forecasted temperature for the launch on January 28th. So it's predicted to be right here, temperature-wise. So you would assume that this type of O-ring damage, you know, would be pretty high. This chart, however, was never created. This is something Edward Tufte creates after the fact, saying, how can I present this data in a way that would have gotten people to like, oh, hold the phone, we cannot launch today. This is very dangerous. If you look at, and I don't know if it's in the book, I don't know if I'll find it online, but if you see the engineer's notes, what they presented to say, they said, we don't suggest that you launch today. And they went ahead and did it anyway. But if you look at the way that they presented the information, it doesn't create as compelling of a case. It's written all in caps. It's hard to understand. The point is that the way that we present this information, the way that we present data can have a radical effect on how we interpret it and how we act on it. And that is one of the key principles of information architecture. How we architect the information is going to have a radical effect about how people act on that. So that is the beauty of Edward Tufte. I'm kind of a groupie. I love Edward Tufte. I went to hear him talk. It was like a rock concert of nerds. And you could get a poster. He has one of his other, there are famous information graphic examples that Edward Tufte talks about and talks about why it was successful and why it was not successful. Anyway, there's a diagram of Napoleon's march on, I don't know what he's marching on, maybe somewhere in Russia, I think. I don't know. It's a famous march of Napoleon's march. And it's a remarkable information graphic. It was created in the 1800s, and it has 6 dimensions of information on it. So do you know what I mean by that? It's like, not only are they talking about, a paper is 2 dimensions, right? We have flat land, flat paper, right? So here it's easy to plot data that is 2-dimensional in nature. We have O-ring damage versus temperature. 2 dimensions of information, 2 axes. That's great. But in a situation like this march, they were traveling over a physical location, so where they were geographically, how many men were on the march at any given time, right? Because a lot of people went, but not a lot of people came back. They have how many people were injured. There are a lot of dimensions of information that is communicated in this 2D flat space. So that's what he calls multivariate data. And he said those are the most interesting stories when we have multiple dimensions of information and we're presenting that in 2 dimensions. So these are the kinds of things we're going to start talking about. And I won't yap on and on forever, but I just want to give you a quick idea.
There are a lot of worse things you could be a groupie for.
It's true. Yeah.
I'm just sitting here surprised that he was not introduced to any of my studies at Merrimack. Really surprised, especially with Swoboda, you'd think.
Yeah. Well, this is more, I mean, it's a different thing. We're talking specifically about information and data and
Although the hierarchy of anything when you're presenting is important. I mean, how are you going to say what you need to say?
right.
So you have to define what's the most important in the hierarchy from there.
Exactly. Exactly. Tufty's big thing is he hates PowerPoint because he feels like his
Yeah.
whole, you can actually find an essay that he wrote. I think it was published in Wired magazine. It's from about 15 years ago. It's a while ago. But he hates PowerPoint because he thinks that when people create presentations, they just fill it with so much PowerPoint junk and all of this excessive noise. And you're exactly right. If you're trying to communicate as efficiently as possible, you got to pull out all that other extra crap.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
that all happens prior to the creation of the presentation.
Right, right. And developing your own hierarchy, figuring out what's most important.
Right.
Okay. So that is your scavenger hunt for week 1 and 2. And again, I'll have you look for different things every week. In this particular example, I'm not telling you to find an example that has to be a website or an app. You might see an example of small multiples in a printed piece, on a sign. You may notice the concept in other places. You'll learn a little bit more about small multiples you'll learn a lot more about small multiples in the Tufty example. I'll give you the 1-sentence description. Small multiples help communicate changes over time. So for example, when you're looking at a diagram of like the weather, and I bet if we just go on weather.com, we'll be able to see this effect. So if we look at the 10-day forecast, look at it in Webster. Okay, this presentation here, do you see how there's a lot of consistency in the way that this is presented? Today, tonight, Wednesday night, Thursday, the type is located in the same place. It's always white. These icons are rendered similarly, so we can get a sense for cloudy, sun's gonna come out. The high temperatures, the low temperatures. Do you see how they present things in a consistent way across all these? So what it allows us to do is to scan it quickly and see changes, to see differences.
Right.
So it's toning down what's similar and allowing our eye to focus on what's different. And so we can quickly get the point across. Tufty has a great example. I think you're going to see it in your readings. It's a manual of, you know, in the airport where the guys are, or the women or whoever are helping the planes come out and they're like, and they've got those hand signals. So it's a training document of the different hand signals and what it means. And he finds it, he takes it and he actually gets it out of the manual and he's like, oh my gosh, there are heavy black borders around everything. It's hard to see what is different from each one. So what he does is he redesigns this graphic and he tones down everything except the light that's in the hand and like the directions, the arrows that show what directions your hands move. Because everything else changes. We know it's going to be a body in a vest. But what's important? The position of the hands and where we move the hands to explain what each is different. So that's the concept of small multiples. It's a technique used in design that allows us to see what's different. Toning down what's the same, but seeing what's different.
Well, no, the other part of information architecture that's really vital is saying as much as you can with as few words as possible.
That's very true. That's very true.
That's been my last 2.5 years.
That's good.
Try to say less with more.
I hear you.
Yeah.
When I first met my husband, he's an ER doc and he's also very distracted all the time. So I told him, we dated long distance. I told him on the phone, I said, I get the sense that your attention span is really limited. So I feel like every time I talk to you, I have to come up with like the most efficient way to deliver the information. And he goes, that's great. Just keep doing that. Yeah,
education.
I know. So yeah, I've been doing that for 20 years. So I'm pretty good at it. Okay, so you guys have a sense of what all of these things are in the week 1-2 module. let's talk about your first project, because this is what the critique is going to revolve around. We can use critique time to talk about different things. There may be some technical issues that you're having. This first project, I would highly recommend that you use Adobe Illustrator to do it. And some of you may not be super duper familiar with Adobe Illustrator. Now is the time to get familiar with it. So if you're feeling not quite comfortable with it and you're taking things out of order, I can suggest a lynda.com course that you can take a look at and just get a little bit of practice with Adobe Illustrator. Also, you're not going to get to the Illustrator point of this project until you're about 3 weeks in or 2 weeks in. The first part of it is gathering the information that we're going to create the visual based on. So you're not even going to get into Illustrator yet. But if you're a little shaky on it, I would take a look at it. You know, spend a couple of hours looking at Illustrator and doing some tutorials to get caught up with it. Another suggestion. Once you gather the information and you're planning your final design, I would sketch it out on paper first, because it's real easy to get bogged down just kind of with the nitty-gritty of Illustrator. So if you have a visual plan, if you have a piece of paper that you're trying to execute, then you kind of have a plan. It just makes it much more efficient, especially if you're unsure about Illustrator. Okay, so let me talk about the assignment. And this assignment was created by a friend of mine. And I was very, very nervous about how this was all going to work, because I didn't make up this assignment. But she's been doing this in information architecture. We did it last year, and we had some awesome results. The examples that I have below are from her class. I just haven't added in my students from last semester or last year, but it turned out really well. So I feel good about it. Okay, so let me just get to the description. So my friend Heather Shaw, she is a professor of design. She's no longer at Leslie anymore. She switched schools, and now she is at, oh no, maybe she is at Leslie still. Anyway, many of us, we went to graduate school together. Many of us utilize some form of digital communication towards establishing a secondary online persona, such as Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, etc. We could not have predicted the broadcast power of the 140 character limit for Twitter, or how an 8-second Snapchat image can make a quick connection to our friends and family. The mundane details of our everyday lives are quickly curated using Instagram's nostalgic lenses and scattered throughout Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Flickr, Foursquare, Amoeba, and other social media outlets. What does Privacy 2.0 offer in terms of online communication, and how has that affected our interpersonal social interactions? These technologies and social media outlets blur the boundaries between our private, personal, and external lives. How do these digital modes for communication change our relationships and social interactions? Do you think digital technologies have enhanced or stunted interpersonal communication? How have such online technologies benefited and or violated our personal lives? Okay, it's a lot to think about here. Let's just get to the nitty-gritty. Your assignment is to keep a detailed diary for the next 72 hours or 3 days of all your digital communication. This includes cell use, texting, email, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, online gaming, etc. Anytime you communicate, either person to person or broadcasting updates about yourself online, is considered fair game and should get logged. The content from your diary will become the data that you use for this assignment. The data is only as good as the documentation, so pay close attention to your actions and keep highly detailed records. Part 1, this is what you should do in the next 7 days. Find a good block of time, and this is what your first part is. Part 1, create the diary. Part 1 of this assignment investigates the accumulation of raw data into comprehensible information and create an awareness of the frequency and duration and modes for communication. This entails gathering a data set and defining methods for structuring that data. We will discuss this within the class discussions. First, for the next 72 hours, make a note every time you answer an email, answer, or send a text, or update your Instagram, etc. Keep a notebook with you at all times for the next 72 hours, as mobile use tends to be sporadic but frequent, making it easy to forget documentation. Your diary should contain the following. Your communication method. Is it a cell use, Twitter, Instagram, gaming, etc.? You need at least 5 modes of communication. Okay. Attributes, the details of the socialization. You need at least 6 attributes for organization. Using the principles of Richard Saul Wurman's latch, location, alphabet, time, category, hierarchy, which you'll learn about in your reading, to identify 6 unique methods for which you can sort your communication. You may use some creative interpretation when choosing your organizational methods. However, it is mandatory that we know the mode of communication socialization, i.e. email. So that has to be one of your categories. What type of communication is it? For instance, some attributes might be time of communication, duration, frequency, person. If there is one, it can be first name or initials. Location of communication, or socialization organized by categories such as flirting, business, or family. Both methods clarify the organization of the diary. However, one is personal, the other is not. For this assignment, both methods are constructive, and you probably want to use a combination of both to have 6 attributes. So every time you communicate, you're going to record the mode of communication, maybe and then the rest is kind of up to you. You might want to do the time interval, who you're communicating with, maybe where you are when you communicate. I mean, maybe 90% of your communication is on the toilet. I don't know, but that might be. You can do whatever you want. In terms of how you categorize your communication. It might be maybe most of your communication has to do with flirting, or the bottom line is that ultimately this communication diary is going to reveal something about you. Okay. All right, I'm not going to get into part 2.
A lot.
Yes, it will. It will. The part of making the diary is really intense. Let me show you some examples about how they turn out. So what we're going to do is take that data and create some kind of visualization that tells us about. Now this is one of so how you're going to create that? Well, fortunately, there are graphing tools and whatnot in Illustrator that I'll help you. So here's some other examples. I think is kind of interesting. And like the background here, she's using the principle of small multiples. So we get the sense of this is the person she's communicating with. Obviously, it makes these people all have about equal communication, and this person she communicates with more. And then we learn a little bit more about them. Then we learn about the method. And then she pulls out some interesting aspects of the data as well. When and where the digital communication occurs most. And the design of this is really nice too, because there's a very subtle background, so all of this data stands out. And we see here, this is a Boston student. We see the map of Massachusetts, so we get a sense of the location of her communications here. And these colors are associated with these right there. So we know where she was when she was communicating with these people. So the tricky thing is just gathering the data and gathering enough information so you have something to create with the data. Okay, so here's another one. And again, you can take a closer look at these. I will add some of my students from last year. Let's see if I can find it. So this is, Jaleesa created this last year. She has a boyfriend in Japan. So if you take a closer look at all this, it reveals some of that.
Military girlfriends understand.
Yeah. This is Eric's. Doesn't seem like a...
Really simple,
Yeah. Yeah, it is pretty simple. It's very clean and very understandable. Eric talks to the ladies a lot more than the men. And a good percentage is about chess. He's on the chess team.
Nice.
46% of his communication is about chess. That's pretty hilarious. I guess so. I don't know. What'd you say? Well, I think that, if you were to log this in a spreadsheet and one of your columns is duration of communication, you could sort those two columns and figure out,
Sure.
total and
So
figure.
you must ask the same questions like when, where.
somehow?
Well, it's up to you to come up with your categories, but I would probably make sure that you're logging like 6 categories. Some of them you can label after the fact. For example, you'd be like, oh, perhaps the topic of conversation, he may be labeled after the fact because he knows he always talks to this person about chess, or I don't know. Do you know what I mean? You could probably you could probably categorize your communication. So you have, I would at least do mode of communication, the duration, maybe where you were when you communicated, who you were communicating with. That's 4 categories right there. And then after the fact, you may be like, well, what was I talking about? What was the intent? Maybe you feel like lately, personal life, my kids were like, I want your phone. Can I play with your phone? I'm like, I need my phone. I'm using this to organize and plan your lives. That is what my communication is all about. It's like driving carpool, birthday presents. Can so-and-so have a sleepover? Mine would probably look like, look, I'm using this phone to plan your lives.
Management tool.
It is managing my children's life. That would probably be the largest percentage of, and I could probably go back and categorize that later, knowing 8 o'clock, I communicated with the AM carpool group on my phone. Obviously, that I could tag that later as relating to my kids' lives. So you want to tell a story about what your communication is about lately. What if you had like this bitch of a boss and they were like bothering you all the time? You can be like, my boss ruins my life. And it's like,
I think you should put that on public in a big poster.
yeah, no, I mean, we all have our own stories. Maybe you have this overbearing parent who's always communicating with you. Maybe you have a sick child that is like, I don't know what your life stories are, but this communication log is going to reveal something about you. So it's somewhat of a personal project. Don't feel totally overwhelmed by the final output of this so far. I just want you to concentrate on getting a really good log. So it might be easier to do over the weekend. I don't know, but I would just write things down and then you can go back and put it into like an Excel or a Google sheet to organize all of it. And that's going to be a lot easier to calculate, duration, times, and percentages and all of that later on. Okay? Yeah.
Does background internet use count?
What do you mean?
Like let's say I'm in a programming class and I'm using an online editor
Yeah.
or something.
Uh-huh.
Would that count as?
Or who are you communicating with?
Well, other people might be able to view the project.
Oh, no, I would communication.
Okay.
If you were saying, hey, I'm chatting on the side and we were all, or like, for example, you're part of a Google Hangout,
Okay.
then I would say that, you're definitely an engaged communicator there.
There's also social content.
Yes.
So does it have to be like a dialogue communication, or can it be more of like you post an update about something?
Oh, an update would count.
What if you post no response?
That's fine. You're communicating with the world. Nobody may be listening. It's
Don't say that. That's not true.
It could be a 1 to 0 communication, but you are communicating. Some of this you're going to define. You can make some of the rules for yourself. This is. I'm just giving you sort of a framework, and you're going to set the rules. So I would, if I were you, go ahead and do the readings, and you may want to do the visual scavenger hunt and start thinking about all of this, and then define a good time to do your log. So when we get back together, the next critique, we'll talk about your logs and how you might organize them. So getting back to your grades, let me just, about the critiques. You guys are all, who's missing from here? Oh,
What will our first critique be? Will it be on the data, or what will it be?
Well, that's going to be kind of tricky. I think there's not going to be a lot of critique. It's going to be more like, here's what my experience, sharing your experience, and maybe some questions about how to organize it. Or here's what I'm thinking my categories are going to be. And here's how you may even have some sketches that you scan in or you take a picture of that you want to share. So usually if you come to class, it's up to you guys. If you have a long commute and you want to participate via Google Hangout, that's totally fine with me. Just kind of give me a heads up. If you actually want to come to the classroom, that's fine too. There may be a week or two where I'm out of town. I'll be like, look, it's a Google Hangout only. So I would get your Google Hangout set up. So just let me know kind of how you want to go about participating. When you participate, And it's a great idea to just log in, even if you don't have anything to share, just to log in and listen to the critiques, because you learn a lot from seeing other people's mistakes or seeing, I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like last semester, oh, I'm good, I listened to this because I had no idea I'm just going to do what she did. That makes sense to me. You know what I mean? Like the project might seem sort of ambiguous. So then when maybe someone might be a little bit ahead of you and they show their work and they get some feedback and you're like, got it, I know what I need to do. It can be really helpful to just listen. So I would try to participate as much as possible. When you actually show your own work, though, what I do is there's an area in here in your grades where it says critique 1, critique 2, critique. Once you do a critique, then I just update it with the number 1 and I put the date in there. So then you can see, yeah, I know I've done 5 critiques. I got to get 3 more in before the end of the semester, and you can kind of keep track of where you are. So by recording it to YouTube, it holds me accountable, because if I can't remember who presented, then I can go back and look at the video and then update it all. So I don't think I've made too many mistakes, but keep track on your own. Make sure, you know, usually we'll meet on Tuesdays, and by the end of the week, I'm like, hey, here's the video. And actually, I think probably I have last year's videos still up here. Let's see. If I go to pages. Here's all of last year's videos where people were showing their work. Ooh, looking pretty rough in some of these, but anyway, I will keep this. I'll make this page accessible to you guys so you can see last year's videos and see what people did, because it's the same projects. And then I'll start building our page of each week's videos. Make sense? Would you guys have questions for me? Or you kind of know what you need to do? I know this is trippy. And if you know that you want to do Google Hangout, just make sure you give me your Google Plus account. And you saw the way Laura, you know, got the alert. She responded to the call, and then she shows up right here. The key thing when you're doing the Google Hangout and you want to share your work, right now I'm controlling the screen, so I hit screen share. I can stop screen sharing, but if I want to screen share, you just hit this green button and you say share entire screen, and then everything I'm doing on my screen will show up to everybody else, and it shows up as part of the Google Hangout. Okay? Yes.
So if you're working on something that you're going to post online eventually, but the thing that you're posting is something that you want to make sure is really detailed and thorough, would you count the time that you spend working on that?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like, let's say I'm working on something that I want to, like, let's say someone's making a YouTube video.
Right.
And they spend a lot of time making this YouTube video. Would you count the time making a YouTube video as part of the log?
Oh, no, because that's not really a communication. It's kind of like you're working on a project.
Okay.
But when you post it, that's sort of communicating to the world.
Okay, so it's not really recording how much time is spent.
Right. It would be only the part where you're communicating. I don't even know if posting the video would necessarily be a communication.
Well, you post something.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah,
Again, you can set the rules for yourself. You can say this doesn't count or this does count. You know what I mean? You define the rules for yourself. There's some things that are obvious. Obviously, every time you send an email, every time you respond to a text, a phone call, you post on Facebook or Instagram, those are all clear social communications. Sharing a YouTube video, sure, you could count that as well. But the time would just be the time that you took to post it.
Not the creation.
Not the creation.
What about automated communication?
Like what?
Have you ever heard of if this then that?
No.
No, if you don't physically do it, it's automated. No, that doesn't count.
Well, what does it do?
Well, I have this thing set up because like I have a Tumblr account, but I don't really want to take the time to
Post to it.
Yeah, post to it. Basically, I have this thing sort of set whenever I do something on Twitter or on YouTube, it like makes a post on Tumblr about the thing I did.
Oh.
You know, it's an automated thing, so you don't have to work quite so hard on your social media.
Yes,
Right,
like,
right,
post
right,
once.
right. No, I have one that goes from Facebook to that. If I post on Facebook, it goes to my Twitter account.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you could include it. It's kind of, again, that kind of a detail. It's up to you whether you want to include it or not. Whether you want, I mean, maybe part of what you want to communicate about yourself is the fact that you are hitting all of these social media outlets. And if that's the case, then I would definitely include that in your log.
Okay.
Like that could be a category, whether it was automatic communication or actually you initiated it.
Okay.
So you write the rules. Okay, guys. Well, I don't really have anything else. I just wanted to give you, I guess I should just, the syllabus is posted, by the way. It's under the syllabus. The one thing that you'll probably be interested in is how your grades are calculated. So your projects are the big part of your grade, 60%. So each one of the 3 main projects, grade. Participating in the critique is 10% of your grade. So if you present 8 times, you've earned your 10%. If you present 7 times, you lose 1-point-something% of your grade. Participation in the discussions. Actually, I feel like I'm going to lower this a little bit and make critique a little bit higher because the discussions aren't, I don't know, it's not as much of an effort. So I may tweak these numbers a little bit, maybe more like 14 and 6 or something like that. The quizzes, the weekly quiz is 10% of your grade. I'm sorry, the biweekly quiz is 10% of your grade. The visual scavenger hunts assignments are 10% of your grade. And that's basically it. That's how it equals to 100. So once again, as you like to think, grades are calculated based on whether the instructor likes you or not. But actually, unfortunately for me, I've got to add up all these points and actually read your work and give you feedback. So it really sucks for me. I wish it was based on whether I liked you or not. You don't. Yes, exactly. At this point, until you start to really annoy me. I'm just kidding. Okay, so I'm going to stop the broadcast.